this time. Guys, welcome back to UAP Studies podcast. And as promised, of course, we have Dave and Marianne joining us from UAP PD. And I will actually do it in order. Michael, you'll go first. Katie, you go second. And I'll go third this time on the questions. But of course, I want to welcome you both to the podcast. And Michael, why don't you shoot off the first round of questions for our guest today?
Okay, I'll start with the softball questions. Who are you guys and what are you doing?
Well, I'll introduce myself first. My name is Marianne Robb, and I was a police officer in Arizona for 34 years. All that time, I've worked various positions in the PD. I've worked, of course, we all start off as patrol officers. I've worked as a crime prevention officer. I've been an arson detective, property crimes detective, and a narcotics detective.
Wow.
Now, all my years that I've patrolled and been out there, under the big blue sky and night sky, I have never seen anything. I have not, and that I can't explain. And oh gosh, 2014, my late husband went to his first UFO conference in Arizona, here in Arizona. It was a UFO, International UFO Congress at the time. And kind of got into MUFON in the Phoenix area and really got into it. I was never really into this stuff.
What was why did he decide to get into the subject?
Well, he read back when he was younger, he read Van Doniken's book, The Chariots of God,
It's
of the
gods.
Gods. And he was always fascinated by all this. And one time when he was fishing, he had a fireball go over at 3 o'clock in the morning, and this thing was humongous. And he's like, what in the world? So that really got him interested also. So when he heard about the International UFO Congress going on in Scottsdale, he calls me up. I'm working. He calls me up and goes, can I go to this? I'm like, sure, knock yourself out. Have a great time. And like I said, I was never really into this, but I supported him. So about 6 months later, he went to, he's been going to MUFON meetings in Phoenix. And he said, please, 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 can you come to a meeting? Okay, I'll come to a meeting. And sorry about this, guys, but as a cop, I'm thinking tinfoil hats. I'm thinking these are going to be weird people. What am I getting myself into? Well, the speaker that day with Kathleen Martin. And as you guys know, Kathleen being the niece, Betty Barney Hill. So I was expecting, Dave and I being cops, we're going to look at your body language. We're going to see if you're being deceptive. So I was doing that. And I'm looking and I'm looking. Oh my gosh. Kathleen is the most amazing woman I have ever met. There was no deception. Her story about her aunt and uncle and everything that she talks about was wonderful. Also, there were no tinfoil hats. There were no weird people at this meeting. This was an amazing meeting where, there were science folks. There were people that were studying this legitimately. So I'm like, wow, okay, MUFON is pretty cool. So all of this, evolved. We started doing a lot of stuff with MUFON. We got to meet a whole bunch of ufologists. I feel like I'm very blessed to have Stan Friedman stay at my house back late 2014 for Travis Walton's Skyfire Summit. And we didn't know who he was at first, but I got to say I was very blessed to have him and listen to him talk. Well, fast forward to about 2023, still going to MUFON meetings, finished a meeting, and it was when the disclosure was coming out. And people were talking about this TikTok thing that the military saw, and this, they were talking about military, the so-called whistleblowers and all this stuff that was going on. And I'm like, okay, cool, whatever, And I'm just thinking to myself, all right, you got military pilots talking, you're starting to get the commercial airlines. They're not talking great, but it's starting to. But I never heard one word about law enforcement, never heard first responders. And I'm thinking, why aren't they talking? You've got over 800,000 law enforcement officers just in the US alone. They're working day shift, they're working night shift. They are under that big open sky. you know they've got to be seeing something, whether a UFO, a paranormal situation, or some type of cryptid, Bigfoot, skinwalker, something, but they're not talking. So I was like, okay, I need to call Dave on this. I need to see what's going on. And this is before UAP PD even started yet. So I called Dave that evening and I said, you know what? Why aren't law enforcement officers talking? What's the reason for that? And the only thing Dave said is, I could tell you exactly why they're not talking. And he proceeds me to tell me about his encounter. And this is where I'm going to say, Dave, it's all you.
All right. So, long and the short of it was my path to this was slightly different. I have never seen a UFO, wasn't really interested in UFOs or the paranormal at all, but I'd had some weird experiences. So one of my experiences was back in 2017 while I was working as a SRO at one of the high schools. Without going into too much detail, because it's a really long story, we got a 911 call from the front desk of the school on a Saturday when there's no students there. And we ended up getting this 911 call, female voice, sounds like it's saying, I'm scared. Dispatcher has a conversation with the person for a few seconds. And then you hear what sounds like the phone being dropped on the countertop. So they dispatch officers. Officers go to the school, they go and they don't find anything. I get told by a supervisor to conduct an investigation for misuse of 911. So we go into
So you mean no one was there at all? Like they got to the
yeah.
hospital?
Well, at the time when it first started, I was a skeptic and I was like, well, there's a logical explanation. So we were thinking, okay, maybe somebody broke into the school, maybe somebody was in the front from one of the classrooms that got routed through. So we start the investigation from the perspective of it's a crime in Arizona to call 911 when you don't really have an emergency. So we start this whole investigation. So what I do is I pull video footage from the security camera at the front desk of the school where the call came in, and that phone is almost dead center of the screen. And so I watch it from 6 o'clock in the morning. The call came in just before noon, all the way till after the officers get there, and there's nobody standing at that phone when that phone call comes in. The officers, when they get there, they find the phone. I watch on video. I watch the officer walk up, pick up the phone off the countertop, have a conversation with the dispatcher, because it was 14-minute open line where the dispatcher was still trying to get somebody to talk, but there was nobody at that phone.
Oh, so you can confirm that it really did come from that phone because the dispatcher is
100%. So I went down every avenue. Like I went with dispatch and said, hey, is there any way that somebody could maybe be from a classroom and call from the classroom and make it look like it was coming from the front desk? And the dispatcher said, no, the way that the 911 call comes in, there's actually a little screen in dispatch that shows where in the school the call came from. So she said, if it came from like classroom 1051, it would literally say the name of the school, classroom 1051, and then it'll even say like what building classroom 1051 is it. But this one said reception 2, which is that front desk, that phone that we had. And then she even followed up with, and besides, even if it did, how did the phone get off the receiver with an open line to 911 that never broke? They had a continuous open line from the time the call came in to the time the officer picks up the phone and says, hey, I'm inside the school. There's nobody here. We're going to conduct an investigation. We're going to, check it out, make sure that there's nobody here. Mm-hmm. So we went every possible route we could go. We checked with the school district to have the phone line checked to make sure nobody tampered with it, make sure there was no computer hacking that took place that caused the phone message to come through. And at the end of the day, I ruled out every possible thing it could be. So I'm left with, okay, I don't know what this is, but I'm running out of options. And when you have no other options, the only thing left, no matter how unbelievable, has to be the thing. And I don't want to say what I thought it was, because I don't want to say that, but one thing led to another. I'm left with this. I show back up at the station and I get called upstairs by a supervisor. And he looks at me and he has a computer set up in the office and it has the security footage on it. He has the audio recording, which I had sent to some people over at MUFON to have analyzed to find out, was it a computer generated? Like, is this some sort of thing that they created with a computer, some sort of voice? And they came back to me and they said, I don't know what you got, but it's not a human voice. And it's clear as day. You can hear what sounds like a woman talking. So I have the supervisor has the audio recording on one screen on one computer. He has the video of the surveillance footage on the other computer. He plays it and looks at me and says, "Do you expect me to believe this?" And I'm like, I was shocked because at this time I had been a police officer for a number of years. I was decorated, life-saving award, meritorious conduct, distinguished service, distinguished team citation. Like I was a relatively highly decorated officer. Like I did all the cool stuff, ran into burning buildings and carried babies out, like the whole 9 yards.
My men crush deepens.
Yeah. And this guy looks at me and goes, "You're lying. Like, I think you're making this all up." And so I got very angry. We had a heated exchange, we'll say. And I went storming out of the office and I got about halfway downstairs and the realization happened that basically he told me to bury it. He told me, don't say anything about it. You're not writing a report. You're not going to do anything about it. And after I stormed out of there, like I said, I got halfway downstairs and I realized if I keep saying stuff, this is a paramilitary organization. What happens to my career? My career's done.
Yeah.
And so I kept my mouth shut for 6 years and didn't say anything about it because of that threat over me of, is my career going to end? I mean, I have a wife and 2 kids, and they were much younger at the time, that I had to support. My wife is a teacher, works in the same school district that this actually incident occurred. So I'm still thinking, like, if I'm saying stuff about it, they're going to put 2 and 2 together. We have the same last name. And then now does she get dragged in? So it was more out of self-preservation. So when Marianne called me on that day and was like, well, why aren't officers and first responders talking about this? I'm like, well, I can tell you exactly why. It's like almost a threat to your career and your credibility and everything. Because all we are as officers and first responders is the evidence we collect and the credibility that we have on the fact that we collected it properly and we're telling the truth. And so with that threat hanging over me, I'm like, that's what it is. And it was funny because Marianne was talking with this other person, and like the implication was that like law enforcement and first responders are part of this global conspiracy to hide the truth from the people. And I'm like, no, it's not nearly as exciting as that. It's, if I get fired as a police officer, I can't go to another agency and get a job as a police officer because the first thing they're going to do is say, well, why did he get fired from this previous one?
Right.
And they're going to be like, well, I don't want to open that can of worms. And so I explained that to her. And it was funny because it kind of spurred this whole movement, this whole UAP PD movement, in the respect that if it happened to me, then we know it's happening to other people. And more importantly, they have nowhere to go with it. They have no one to talk to about it. These are people that have dedicated their life to trying to protect and help and serve, and they're just basically being left in this like weird limbo of, as weird as it is, they saw something that was real, and by saying what they saw that was real, they're going to get in trouble. And so it's this weird kind of dichotomy.
Because excuse me, just to interject there, but aren't you guys trained to wherever the evidence leads, kind of like the Sherlock Holmes, like, regardless of how impossible it must be, if evidence is there, it is what it is. And then to have somebody say, no, not this time. No.
Yes.
We follow the book, but not on this term. Yeah.
And that's the conundrum that we get into, where exactly like what you're saying, Jason, is I have evidence. I kept, and that's the part that's interesting, is I still have the security footage. I still have the audio recording. I kept all that stuff because I'm like, this is truth. This is what we found. And they're telling me to not say anything about it, bury it, don't talk about it. And the interesting thing is I found out after the fact, because I reconnected with one of the 2 officers that was in the video that went there, and we got to talking about it. And he's like, well, I got called in by command staff as well and told to not say anything about it. And he was like, yeah, they were pissed. They didn't want me to say anything. They knew you had already done an investigation. So they clearly did not want us talking about this. But yeah. So that basically from there kind of was the origin of UAP PD, where we're like, if it happened to me, if it happened to other officers, then it's got to be happening all over the world. So we created this group to give these first responders a place where they can talk in safety, not be judged, not be thought of as crazy, and start the healing process, get the word out there, and either chronicle these things, help them deal or navigate with the stresses of it. And ultimately, like I said, my pipe dream is to push the needle, because one of the things, I don't want to take up too much of your time, but one of the things that we, during the cases that we've been talking to, we talked to some officers that were on one of the Native American reservations here. And when I explained my story to them about what happened to me, they were kind of floored that a supervisor would tell me not to talk about it. But we basically came to the conclusion that because of the fact that things like star people, spirits, skinwalkers, cryptids are such an ingrained part of their society, there isn't that stigma that these officers face. They see stuff, they're allowed to talk about it to other officers and to people because it's not viewed as being taboo or stuff you don't say. But it is here off the reservation. So ultimately, we would love to be able to be part of the people that help push that needle into making people. I don't think I'm ever going to be able to make people believe admit that Bigfoot exists or UFOs are real or ghosts exist or anything like that. But if I can at least help make people go, hey, you know what? There's more in this world than I think we understand, and truly mean that, like, then I think we're doing something positive. We're helping society kind of come to grips with this.
Nice. Katie.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a problem, the stigma, because there's certain, let's face it, there's certain careers where we want people to be just mentally sound and stable. And when you start talking about ghosts and UFOs and cryptids, you get judged no matter what. So I know that with the hearings in Congress and stuff, they were looking like to actually have something that will protect pilots and officers. I mean, we want our police officers and our pilots and our surgeons to be really sound of mind. Do you think there's a way that you could put something like that together in the police departments where they don't have to have fear of losing their job? But I guess the problem then becomes they're always going to have ridicule, right? I mean, so that really, even if they sign something, you're still going to be judged, right? So when a police officer comes forward to your organization, is this kept strictly confidential? And can you push the information out with keeping their name secure? And do you do that? That's question number one. And number two, what you just explained sounds more paranormal in nature. And I have so many questions, like, was this female voice you heard, was this English? And did you think it's more ghostly in nature? And if so, how did that get you to the UFO part?
Dave, I'll answer that first part.
Yeah.
Is that when we talk to any law enforcement officers, we give them the option. Do you want to remain absolutely anonymous, or do you want to be identified? Because we might share their story. And I just did an interview with a guy just a couple of days ago. He's been retired for probably 6-7 years. And he says, you can use my last name, but I don't want you to use my first name, and I don't want you to use the agency that I worked for. I had another one. He's a federal Department of Corrections a few years ago. And we sat there, we talked about all of the encounters he had. He had a lot of the UFO and actual contact with an entity. And even though he's been retired for probably close to 10 years, he told me he did not want to be identified at all. And he literally started crying, and I've got it on tape. He started crying, says, thank you for listening to me. He said, I don't know where to go. He said, but please don't use my name. Don't use my photo. Don't identify me, because he's still to this day scared that the government would take away his pension. That's how some people are that scared still to this day to share their encounter with us. So that's why we give them the option to be anonymous or identify themselves.
Yeah, and Katie, to answer the second part of that question, that was a very brief overview of it. We actually ended up doing a full investigation into what ended up happening, because it was an English voice. First of all, it spoke in English. One of the things that I didn't tell you, kind of without going into a ton of details, when the officers went into the nurse's office, they actually had an encounter with something that physically pushed the two of them aside, but it was invisible. They couldn't see it. So they literally had some sort of physical hit that happened to them. And so that took the investigation into a different kind of direction. And we did, I think we found out what it really was, because it was more paranormal than anything else. And it had to do with the nurse at the school having an attachment that we believe followed her from her house
Hmm.
to the school. And so again, this was a long investigation. So to sum it up here, like if I was to tell you the whole thing, we'd be talking for hours about all the stuff we went down. But how this kind of got us to, like, the UAPPD, the UAP and UAPPD for us doesn't stand for unidentified aerial phenomenon. It actually stands for unidentified anomalous phenomenon.
Okay.
And the reason for that is my encounter was paranormal, but we have encounters with first responders that are UFOs. We have encounters that are Bigfoot. We have encounters that are ghostly. We have encounters that don't even fit in any of those three categories. They're kind of their own kind of unusual, like unexplained kind of interactions. And so what happened is all these other groups that have kind of formed over the years usually find some sort of subject, and then they say, we're going to address this subject.
Mhm.
UAPPD, we kind of started different, and it's kind of how we do our investigations. We conduct all of our investigations the way a law enforcement investigation would be handled, where we don't rule anything out. We start ruling things out until we're left with what's left, as opposed to saying, hey, this is a ghost, this is a UFO, this is Bigfoot, let's prove that it was that. It was, let's disprove everything else, and the only thing that we have left is what it could possibly be. So in the process, because we approach it from the perspective of we're not looking for UFOs or ghosts or cryptids, our subject matter are first responders. What are they seeing? And the reality is they're seeing ghosts, they're seeing cryptids, they're seeing UFOs, and they're seeing and experiencing things that don't really even fit in any of those categories. And so we're like, we can't just only take reports from like people that saw UFOs, or we can't only take reports from people that saw a ghost or a Bigfoot. We're here for them. So our subject, it's weird, but in a way, like our subject isn't what the unexplained is. Our subject are the first responders and helping them. And so in the process, we kind of opened ourselves up. And so my thing is, as much as I like UFOs and Bigfoot, I love the paranormal stuff. That's my intrigue. Marianne's is more UFO oriented. We have other people that are involved in the group as well that are kind of like more cryptid, more spiritual, stuff like that. So that's where it's kind of different. Like we firmly believe that all three of those things exist, and they're all somehow interwoven and related, because we're finding so many crossovers with things. One of the great things is, like I said, we talked to these officers that were on one of the reservations out here. We talked to 4 officers. Each officer gave us 2 stories, and half of the total stories that they gave us all had to do with one specific location. And the part that's funny is each story at that location was something slightly different.
Mhm.
One was like a ghost encounter. One was like a skinwalker encounter. One was like a little person encounter. And then the last one was, I don't know what the heck it was, but it was interesting because, in my opinion, I think it's fascinating because I really do believe that all these things are somehow interwoven. And so I may launch into an officer who saw something that they think was a cryptid, and it turns into something that might even be extraterrestrial, like a UFO or something like that. Like we got a great story from McNary about a horse that got hit by a car and then shot, and then it was dead, and then the body disappeared. And the entire time that they were thinking, when we were first getting the story told to us, they were thinking paranormal, paranormal, paranormal. And then out of left field, I go, well, it's kind of like cattle mutilations, where you'll have a farmer that was in the field working on a fence, and he turns around and all the cattle are fine. He goes back to working on the fence. Like 30 seconds later, he turns around and one of the cattle is now mutilated in there. And it was similar to that. And so the entire kind of investigation almost pivoted from, we thought it was paranormal, but now is there an element of like cattle mutilation type of scenario there? So I think it for us personally, UAPPD, I think it's a disservice to only focus on the one thing. I think it's better to look at it with that open mind and be like, hey, this could be any one of these things. Let's run down all of them and see what kind of fits.
So you guys, you're trained in dealing with humans. I mean, human psychology, you're watching people's body languages. but you're not trained to handle something out of this world. And, by the sounds of it, when you look out through history, there's so many famous reports that include police officers. And yet I think we never take the police officers' investigations in these cases seriously because we assume, no, once MUFON moves in or once a big organization or J. Allen Hynek shows up, then it's an official investigation. But what would you say the percentage of incidences include police officers or first responders with these occurrences? How often, what percentage would you give it?
Gosh,
Are
I
we
wouldn't even,
talking back in the day of Zamora? Or are we just
Well,
talking?
just in general, police officers, if something happens, something lands, police officers are dispatched. There's one famous case that you could hear the police recording when the call first come in, to go chase a UFO. They're like, is this serious? And then you
Mhm.
could hear it was 4 different states, 4 different
yeah.
police units chasing the same thing. They all confirmed this thing was there. And you mentioned the stigma, even though they were a group, they were a collective that saw it, there's witnesses, they'll still have a stigma at the office. And, basically, I'm asking this because I went down to the RCMP and I gave them my contact information on UAPs. If, this stuff is happening here in British Columbia as much as it is anywhere else, I thought maybe I could educate them. I was only met with like a smirk, like, who's this weirdo?
Mhm.
I went up to police officers. I asked them actually if I see something, what happens? He goes, well, if it's in the sky, we call NORAD.
Mhm.
I'm like, okay, so the RCMP doesn't deal with it. They call NORAD. I'm like, what if it lands? He goes, we call NORAD. So everything is just sent over to NORAD. The RCMP does not investigate these things. So, but often RCMP do show up to an event, or if somebody calls 911 or panic. So I'm just wondering, like I always keep saying, maybe it's 35% of big cases include police officers, but I want to make sure that my percentage is correct there.
Well, Jason, that's a hard one to actually nail down because how many officers are willing to come forward and say something because of it? Because you might have an officer who sees something and never wants to say anything. Because like I didn't say anything for 6 years under that fear of my career. But like right now, you have two police officers talking, and we got a 50% sighting rate because I saw something Marianne didn't. So it's hard to give you a hard fast rule because of how many officers are not saying stuff. Because we've had officers that we've interviewed that I never in a million years would have thought had a sighting, and then they ended up telling us. And so the issue that you're facing there with the whole you walk in there and you talk to them and they give you a smirk, and I hate to say this because it sounds bad, but it's one of those things where I'm not surprised that you would get that reaction.
Right.
Now, the reason for that is because what during our presentations, when we talk about the stigmas that law enforcement face, one of the things that we address is we call it the band of brothers and sisters. Um, Law enforcement and first responders is an interesting career because it's a career where, like Marianne and I were willing to take a bullet for each other. Now, I don't think like the Subway sandwich artist is willing to take a bullet for the guy that's working the register. So it's like a different, environment.
The sandwiches aren't
So
that good.
exactly. So we have this bond with each other where we know we would be willing to literally lay down our lives for each other.
Mm.
And that creates this bond where if we walk into a police agency and kind of say, "Hey, this is what happened to me," it's amazing how many officers will kind of lose that smirk, and they may not. And here's the thing: they may not. And Marianne can back me up on this one. They may not say anything right there, but we'll give them cards, and I guarantee you within a day or two we'll get an email or a phone call from one of them, and it'll be something along the lines of, hey, you were at the station this day, or I saw you on a podcast, or I saw you at an event, and I didn't get the opportunity to say something to you, or I wanted to say something but there was a crowd of people. And then we'll set up a time where we can talk and they'll tell us everything. And it has to do with that weird bond that we all have where if I've been through the mess, Marianne's been through the mess, they've been through the mess, they look at us and they go, okay, I can tell him because I know he has gotten up and done those child death notifications or responded to that drowning kid or did CPR on somebody who died or was in it's a unique job where you see things that you will never forget.
Mm.
And that forges, like almost like a crucible, it forges something with each of us where there is a level of trust there where somebody who's never done it before, I'm not going to necessarily open up and talk to them. And we've had that happen. We've had officers be like, well, I wouldn't tell them, but I'll tell you. And so it creates that kind of aura of inability to figure out what that percentage is, because how many guys are in that arena right now where they're like, I want to tell somebody, I just don't know who to tell. I saw, hey, these people are talking about this sighting that they saw, and I saw it too, but I don't want to say anything because I don't want to be judged. I don't know who to talk to. I don't know who to get. So unfortunately, I don't know if there's any way to really come up with a hard, fast percentage of how many officers and first responders have experienced stuff, because it's still at that point where it's still, not talked about.
Mm.
Now,
So.
one of the things, Jason, you were talking about at the beginning about dispatch gets call of light in the sky, or I love Lumberton, North Carolina, the late great Lee Spiegel's case. I mean, I love that case. And I know there's others. St. Louis is one, and there's a few others where agencies from different cities and counties have been chasing lights in the sky.
Mm-hmm.
And you hear them on the radio. A lot of times they take it serious. Hey, it's coming your way, or it's this, or it's coming this way. Well, I haven't gotten anything recently, but I guess, example of a good case where cops were very professional was in Las Vegas. Okay. First of all, Las Vegas was a hoax. I mean, it was a hoax.
No, we're
However,
talking about the ones that landed in the backyard.
yeah, that's supposed to have been in the backyard. Yes.
Okay.
Now, I got to say, the officer that got the meteor flying across the sky on his body cam, oh man, he needs to get a lottery ticket, because I guarantee, I don't think anybody's ever going to get that again. That was amazing. But then, of course, they get the call of that there are these 8-9 foot entities in this backyard from this family. Well, the officers, you see, they get there and you're looking at the body cam. First of all, you hear the dispatch, and the dispatch, they were a little hesitant, but they did they called out the officers. They dispatched them to the area. Then you look at the body cams of these officers that are in the middle of the road, and they're talking, and they're like, what? And you even see their face. They weren't making stupid smirks. They weren't making stupid comments. They were like, we don't know exactly what's going on, but we're going to do our investigation. As police, we don't have a code for, a UFO or an entity in somebody's backyard. It's going to be either a trespassing call or an unknown trouble call. So we treat that call as we would a police call of an unknown trouble. Okay, let's go do the investigation. Let's see if we can come up with an answer. What did you see? And I was very impressed. They weren't laughing. They weren't joking. Now, you said about when the RCMP guys, what do you do? What do you do? Oh, we call NORAD. Well, I know a year or two ago that there was an organization, I think it was the Midwest Chief of Police Organization, put this supposedly guideline out for law enforcement. Well, I read it all. It's a very good newsletter, because it says, okay, if you see something, call MUFON. We've got the International UFO Bureau now. Or, you just, here's a phone number, call. I think, and I don't know how, but I think we really do need to get a guideline. And if there's any way to go to every police agency and say, okay, if you do have this, go ahead and call the MUFON. If there is a crash, of course, the government's going to be the first one out there anyway. But say there is a crash and the law enforcement are first ones out there, well, they need to know you don't go anywhere near. You got all that radiation. You've got all kinds of stuff that can kill you. So that would be the guideline. And it would be awesome if we can get, I know there was a gentleman that wrote a book. The book it's not a good, solid guideline for every law enforcement agency in the US, Canada, and anywhere else to when they encounter something or they're dispatched. But I got to say, Vegas, I was very impressed with the officers' demeanors on their body cams when they went out there to do their investigation.
Yeah. Well, they know about Area 51. Michael, go ahead.
So I was recently at the SCU conference, the Scientific Coalition of UAP Studies, and there was a presentation there by a guy named Sean Grosvenor. Do you know who he is?
No.
He's a law enforcement professional. I think he's recently retired. He was one of the head investigators or heads of investigation for the entire Chicago area, and he is proposing exactly what you're saying should exist. A set of guidelines that they eventually, I think, want to kick into a piece of legislation for how police organizations would investigate things like this. And on the surface, I felt like it was a good idea until he gave his presentation and outlined exactly what those protocols would be for investigation. And then I started to kind of get worried. And I'll explain why and let you see if you think that my worries are justified. So some of the protocols he outlined were things like, well, we need to really take this seriously. And so if somebody reports seeing something really weird in the sky or something landing, you need to go respond to it. You need to take testimony from this person. If they've had any sort of contact, you need to take body, organic samples from the person's body. You also need to figure out if the person's crazy. So you need to take a toxicology report. You need to get their psychological evaluation. You need to look at their medical history and things like that. And you need to put together this whole dossier on the incident, and so that you can evaluate whether this person's reliable or whatever. And you also need to make it public so that UAP organizations can
That's invasive.
investigate all these things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I found that really alarming. Not just because it seemed so like the proposal was to give an unlimited amount of power to the police to compel people to cooperate with these investigations, of course, and you can compel it because you could frame any UAP sighting as a national security issue, at which point it becomes so serious that it might not be up to the person whether they give testimony or not. You also might be able to compel people who didn't even call the police. Like if I call the police and say I saw something in the sky, I had contact with it, and my neighbor saw it, you might be able to compel the neighbor to have their orifices swabbed or whatever. That was really alarming to me, and but it seemed like good faith. I'm not impugning Mr. Grosvenor's or anybody's motives here, but it seemed to me like kind of a poisoned pill, or like an instrument we're devising all these protocols that could be used in the worst possible way. It seemed like it could be used either to really rigorously investigate these phenomena, or it could be used to discredit anybody who reported one, because I don't know of anybody who could pass all of those things without arising any suspicion. I take a medicine for migraines that's also listed as an antipsychotic. And if I submitted to a toxicology report, somebody could say, well, he's on antipsychotics. That's why he's crazy.
And Michael, that would be like a deterrent for somebody to come forward,
Very
knowing
much
they
so.
would have to go through
Absolutely.
all those steps. Like I wouldn't call them. I'd be like, screw that. I'll call MUFON, right? At least
Precisely that. Yeah. So how do we come up with a set? There's a question here. How do we come up with a set of like protocols for police departments to take these things very seriously that also can't be used in a way to harm or dissuade people from even wanting to report them in the first place?
Well, I think personally, I think it starts from the perspective of understanding that we're after the truth, but we're also not after persecuting people who should not be persecuted. So I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think there are certain things that would go without saying. Any type of investigation like that, you should have somebody respond and take a look at it and take readings and take tests, and they should interview the people who saw it, because whether you're investigating like a shoplifting or an auto theft or an arson, those are your standard investigation procedures of getting out there and looking at the scene, gathering evidence, getting statements from people. The part that was kind of alarming was all of a sudden determining the psychological background of the person and stuff like that. As an officer, we don't do stuff like that. We don't like The
Yeah.
closest you might come to something similar to that would be like maybe like a DUI investigation where you're taking blood or breath to determine if somebody was intoxicated when they were operating a motor vehicle. I think and even that, to do that, when you sign to get your driver's license, one of the things that nobody ever bothers reading in that big book that they sign to get their driver's license, one of the things that they actually are signing is that if at any point during my driving career, a law enforcement officer believes that I might be under the influence of some sort of drug or alcohol or something like that, I am giving them permission to take my blood or my breath and test and make sure that I'm not. And that's why we do the FSTs before you ever do that. You don't just run right up and say, hey, I'm going to take your blood and make sure you're not drunk. You run them through field sobriety tests, which are not invasive. Things like, the finger to
Touching your
nose
nose.
test and the walk and turn and all of that sort of stuff. So there's like a process that we go to that becomes more and more invasive, but it's still based off of the fact that when you signed to get your driver's license, you said that if somebody thought that an officer thought that I was driving under the influence, I will let that happen. And then even still, to get things like that blood, we still get court orders from the judge allowing us to do that. But we wouldn't do something like that if like, hey, somebody stole my wallet. I'm going to show up and have to ask and determine that they're not crazy and they didn't really not have a wallet. That seems a little over, like crossing a line to me.
And also it's like saying that somebody has like a mood disorder or depression or something like that, cannot see a UFO, like that
Yes.
automatically exclude them from the list
Mhm.
of, it's like somebody that has PTSD from war. So,
Yeah.
no, you didn't see anything, you have PTSD. So most likely you saw your PTSD flying around taking
Well,
people. Yeah.
one thing Dave does, we used to teach advanced interviewing techniques at the MUFON field investigator training. And one of the things that Dave brings up is even a crazy person could tell you there's a McDonald's down on the corner.
Mhm.
They can still see stuff. I mean, or be able to tell you where something is, a gas station on the side of the road, just because they have some type of mental illness.
Mhm.
Now, my biggest thing is HIPAA. I'll be darned if I'm going to give you my medical. You better have a search warrant to get my medical stuff.
Yeah.
And then the last thing you said, this gentleman said, was it can go public. Oh,
Yeah.
no.
Yeah. So one of the things that I didn't really mention when we brought up when we did our background is I worked in detectives as homicide and sex crimes, and so I was a forensic interviewer. So I interviewed victims of sex offenses, both adult and children, and that was one of the big things. Is like we when we do these investigations, people are still having experiences. So even if somebody is mentally ill or afflicted by something, they can still tell the truth. They can still tell the truth about what happened to them. And it's stuff that should be believed, but we don't go down the road of trying to say, well, this person's crazy, so obviously that didn't happen to them. We don't know that. They could have an experience that it's imperative for us to make sure that we do a thorough investigation, but we're never going to we wouldn't turn around and then, oh, I'm going to now release in the media what happened to this person. No, that doesn't.
Yeah.
That,
And what they deem you that you're full of
completely.
crap? Like, is that on the public record? Like, this
Yeah,
guy's full of
that,
crap? Like,
yeah, and does that mean that if they, okay, and especially with this type of arena, when you're talking about the paranormal, UFOs, things like that, if somebody misidentifies something, they see something that they don't know, it's a SpaceX launch or something like that. Now you're turning around and saying, well, they're crazy because they said that they thought it was a UFO and it wasn't. It was just a SpaceX launch. First of all, that's not right. And then what happens if 2 months from now they see something that isn't a SpaceX launch? Now, are they branded as somebody who, well, they can't be trusted because they, were incorrect? Not that they were lying. They were
like a boy who cried
incorrect.
wolf situation.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So I have a lot of reservations about what you told us that this guy was proposing. I mean, to a certain point, the first part of it, sure, spot on. That's the way an investigation should be done. But then there is definitely a point where that goes way too far.
Yeah,
And
you left out the anal swab. Katie,
yeah,
go ahead. It's your turn.
So, Arizona, as we know, is one of the most active states in the whole country in the United States. Arizona has a lot, and I know the Phoenix MUFON great. Shout out to Stacy and all the work that you guys do out there. It's great. And I also know that Phoenix MUFON has a very low percentage of actual unidentified. Most things are identified through your group. I have a question, a couple questions. So, let's say, and this is often the case with many UFO reports that come in, people are outdoors a lot. Of course, state of Arizona, it's warm almost year round. So you guys have a lot of people out hiking, camping, fishing. You have Snowflake, Arizona out there. And let's say we're a group of campers and we're seeing something we can't explain. How how often do you guys get these reports, first of all? Because I wouldn't think if you're out having a camp, you're going to be drinking some beers, maybe smoking a little pot or whatever. I wouldn't think I'm going to call my local law enforcement and report this for that very reason, because we don't want to be, oh, how many beers are you guys drinking? Are you guys smoking some weed or whatever? So, how often do you guys get reports? And also, like, is there a way? It's such an interesting thing because you guys as officers see the dark side of society, right? You see the mental illness, you see the drugs and alcohol. It's a fine line. At what point does an investigation, if somebody calls it in and they've had a couple drinks, I mean, we don't want our taxpayer money going into investigating cryptids, ghosts, and UFOs. So if an officer thinks there's a group of 7 people and there's something going on, do they pass it on to somebody? What is a protocol? Or do they say, oh, these guys are just out partying, let's just blow it off, and nothing happens of it? So, question one, how often do you guys get reports from people? And is there a line at some point where an officer would pass it on to somebody else, or do they just forget about it altogether?
Well, I'll take how often. We don't really know.
Oh,
We don't have that. What UAP PD does, we get encounters from other law enforcement officers that actually have had the encounters themselves. And
okay,
they just
but do
don't know
the
where to go.
reports go into a system? Let's say, we see something, we decide to call the police. Will that go into a system? And is there a way to access that data? Like, oh, we get so many calls a month on things that are ghostly or UFO related. There's no way to find that out?
That I know. Dave, have you
Well,
heard of any type of
okay,
analysis?
so any type of, like Marianne hit on this before, like any type of call that we end up getting as law enforcement will get clustered into whatever is the closest thing. So an unknown trouble or
Trespass.
trespassing or stuff like that. There
Hmm.
are police reports taken of those things. Now, how much detail the officers go into on those police reports are going to depend on the individual officer. Like I said, I had a full police report and then I was told to shut it down. So it depends on how diligent that officer is in wanting to do that investigation. As far as where it goes from there, any type of police report is public record. So that'll get put into records and people can file for a Freedom of Information Act. You are going to need to know some stuff to narrow it down, like a date
Right.
range that might have occurred or a location, maybe somebody that was involved or some sort of name that you can pull, because it's literally going to go into all of these different police reports that this agency stored. So there's going to have to be some way of trying to narrow it down so you're not getting, like I said, the shoplifting and then the auto theft and then this and that and the other thing. But as far as major things, like if an officer encounters something that he thinks is truly unusual, there are other services that we can call. I mean, we know that people have called the Air Force before that have been involved in different types of investigations and stuff like that.
Don't do that. No.
No, yeah, it's probably not advisable, but there are only so many things, because a lot of times when you think about it, when you're in trouble, you call 911. Who does 911 call? It's like a great conundrum. It's like we just call other officers and have more of us there. And since, like, I think Jason touched on this at the beginning, there's not a protocol of what do you do now? Like, because here's the reality. You get sent to a call and like that Las Vegas one, what if they walked in the back and they did see 9 foot tall aliens? What are you going to do? Well, the first thing he's probably going to do is call his supervisor, because what else do you do? And then the supervisor is going to show up and he's going to be like, I'm going to call my supervisor, and then he's going to call his
Just goes up the
supervisor.
chain, right? Yeah.
Yeah, until eventually the chief of police is there going, I have no idea where we go from here.
Do you think that's why they
No.
shut you down? Because your supervisor doesn't want to have to go to his supervisor and his to his, like the embarrassment would go up the chain. Do you think that's why they want you to shut it down as the investigator?
I believe in some cases, yes. I think that's why we know for a fact that the Las Vegas thing, we know that officers were told by higher ups to not talk about it
Mm.
for that very reason. They're like, you're done, don't talk about this, because they wanted to avoid that embarrassment. But in a weird way, and it's kind of, you know, I don't want to say counterproductive, but there is a certain level of self protection that they are doing, not just self, but for the officer. Because if that supervisor really wanted to be in trouble, he could say, go run your mouth, keep talking about it, do it, see what happens. And then the inevitability is my career goes down the toilet and I'm out of a job.
Mm.
So, in a weird way, he kind of was trying to protect me from destroying my own career by making me realize, hey, you need to not talk about this now. And that's why officers that are still on the job, we have to be diligent on protecting them and protecting their identity, just like in a weird way, this sergeant kind of was trying to protect me. I mean, granted, his bedside manner could have used a lot of work, but in a weird
Wait,
way,
you were in your bed?
yeah.
Mm.
But there's a lot of like stuff like that where it is like we need to avoid that embarrassment, and in the process we need to protect the agency and the integrity of this department and of this stuff. And I hate to say it, but sometimes that makes the officer is the expendable one. Like whenever you're trying to protect stuff, something has to, to protect this, this might have to suffer, and the lowest level are the people that usually begin.
Now, one thing that's interesting with Katie is I bet if we looked at the cases, the UFO cases that were back east, New York, New Jersey, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, it's real interesting. When I went back to Pine Bush, we went back and spoke Pine Bush, New York, last month, and listening to Pine Bush, the Hudson Valley, those officers, they see things, they write reports. Everybody knows about it. It's out there. It's not that big of a deal. The officers just to tell everybody, and they're like, "Yep, we saw it too. Yeah, that's going on." But what's weird is the people on the West Coast, here, New Mexico, California, all the West Coast, they're not talking. I don't see reports. People are not, the officers are not writing reports. We had a paranormal case out of El Paso, Texas. And when the officers left that scene, it was a domestic violence. It came out where they actually saw some paranormal activity, the two officers. When they left, they looked at each other, says, "We are going to shut up. You are not writing a report. It was just a loud TV upstairs. We missed it. Okay." And they left. And they never talked about it. And that was in the mid 90s. And we just got that report in 2023 because they would not talk about it. Why East Coast? It seems, okay to talk, but the West Coast, except on the Indian reservations, it's not acceptable to talk about their encounters. I would love to hear how or why that does happen.
Now, we got time for one more question each. Marianne, when it comes down to police officers involved with these cases, have you had, because I'm always worried with anybody in law enforcement or military, because military have had injuries, severe illnesses, which we know for a fact that they have to go to Wright-Patterson Air Force because of the type of injuries they suffered from these technologies. Have you heard of any police officer being injured physically? Because, even abductees sometimes are injured physically. So I'm wondering if that happens to police officers. And have you heard of police officers having missing time or being abducted themselves?
I have two. One is out of Houston, Texas. Again, these officers don't come forward until there is a safe zone, which is us. Now, this occurred probably 2000, 2001. and it was in Houston, Texas, where this guy was visited by entities 4 or 5 different times. Um, he wakes up in that twilight sleep. He'll be visited in his house by what he believes are grays, the gray aliens. He has found implants in his ear. He has found implants in his belly button. And at one point, he was so scared because he didn't know how far these grays were going to go to hurt him. He made a spike out of wood. He figured that if it was either a gun or a knife or something metal, that they could tell what he had to protect himself. So he actually made this out of wood, a spike, and he had it under his bed. And at one point, Gray did come down, and they were literally doing a tug of war and a fight on his bed. The officer grabbed him by its neck, and he was trying to reach under his bed to get the spike, and he just couldn't reach it. It was just out of reach. And at one point, he had to let go for a second as he reached back down. And at that point, the gray was gone. There was another one in the room, kind of being like a watch, a lookout. But all of a sudden, they went up the ceiling into the roof, and they were gone. And he never had another encounter at that point. But yeah, that affected him. He actually had implants that were taken out. The other one I had just recently was that federal detention officer. He also had encounters 3 or 4 different times, and he also had one at his house again. After doing a basically like an exorcism, there is, I get a prayer that he would say to keep the entities, to keep anybody away from him. But he said about 6 months after the encounter happened, he came down with a serious illness that no doctor could explain. And he actually had to retire because he was feeling so physically ill to the point where he was having a hard time walking.
Wow.
But so he had to retire, and no doctor, as of to this day, can say what's wrong with him. And he feels that that's having those encounters with the entities is what gave him that illness.
And it sounds like these are repeat abductees, but it wasn't from being on the job or anything like that. It just sounds like they're in law enforcement, but they're abductees, the same as the general population are. And we've had how many countless people on the podcast, guys, that are from the DOD or, the Navy. They're all experiencers. And that always surprises me that how many experiencers are out working in these fields. And, everybody, we're all in this together. It could be a judge, a producer, police officer, a doctor, where nobody's excluded from having these experiences. But you've had nothing in the sense of a police officer going to a case and then having a blip of time missing or anything like that. That hasn't happened, like an abduction while on the job.
Well, Val Johnson was injured. He was responding to a car accident and he had object that flew through the windshield of the patrol car, smash into him. He ended up fracturing his teeth. He had what they attributed to as like welder burns on his eyes.
Because he tried to drive through it, didn't he?
Well,
This
it kind
orb
of
thing?
went through him. I think
Oh,
went,
okay.
he was going this way. It was going this way.
Huh.
And he had some missing time too. I don't know if it was missing time because of the damage to the car or if it was legit missing time, but I know he was unconscious for a while and the car kind of rolled over. But he definitely had physical injuries, both the burns to his eyes, the physical injury to his mouth, and then just the impact of it hitting him as well. So we know of things like that. So there have been officers on the job that have been hurt or experienced things like that, but that's the only one that I can think of offhand. I know that there are others, but I'm just like kind of just thinking offhand right now.
We'll have to look into that. Michael, go ahead.
It strikes me that there's a lot of people in the world who, especially sort of America, who have a really deep distrust of the police as an organization, not the particular people who are police. And it seems like you both have started to encounter in your own experiences with the police, some of the reasons why people feel distrustful of it. I mean, even from the inside, it's not always explicit corruption. It's sometimes that the organizations themselves have evolved in certain ways that are kind of opposed to justice or care about individuals. Um, and I feel for you that you've experienced that, because it sounds really painful to spend so long in a career with people that you trust and love, and then to hit these kind of structural walls built into the organization that make you feel like outsiders or something, just because you've had experiences that don't comport with their picture of reality. Um, what would you say to police officers who haven't experienced these things themselves, but who want to be more compassionate and open to the people who have?
I think for me, I would tell them to just remember that we are the same people that you think we are. We're the same people that hit that house on the search warrant with you, backed you up on a car accident. Um, we're involved in that foot pursuit. We're all trying to do the same thing. Again, because yeah, even though in America a lot of people distrust the police, I think you hit the nail on the head there, Michael, where the individual officers are just like the majority of police officers that got into police work and first responders want to help people. That's really at the core what it is. We're not trying to be judgmental. We're not trying to, be badge heavy or anything like that. We got into it for the reason that we think was good and pure, which is to help people and help make a difference in the world. And so for those officers that haven't experienced things, just remember those that you see an officer or first responder who has seen something, maybe a little bit of grace. Remember, like, yeah, I'm that same guy that backed you up when things went south on that arrest and we were fighting people. I'm that same person. We just experienced something that we can't quite figure out. And I think as officers, trust each other and trust that we're going to try and do the right thing. I don't know if Marianne wants to put in, but that would be my take on it.
Yeah, I mean, try to educate them, and that's talking about. I worked on the south side of Gilbert Police Agency, and my guys knew what I did. I had Mark D'Antonio, I had Peter Robbins, Stacy Wright. People ride with me. They knew I was part of MUFON. They knew I was into these type of whether it's a UFO or cryptid or anything like that. They respected what I did, and if they didn't know something, or they felt a little scared about some question they might have, they ask me. And you know what? We educate them. So they are not going off assuming things. Ask me a question and I will tell you, or at least I'll try to tell you the answer or find the answer for you. So at least they're educated on this situation. Dave, on the other hand, he worked North Gilbert. 2 weeks before he even retired, he was still having bumper stickers put on his locker, honk if you like grays, or tinfoil hats. And he was ridiculed 2 weeks until he retired, 25-year veteran. And again, even if he tried to explain things to them, they didn't want to hear. No, I don't want to hear. But same agency, two different areas, how they respected me. But I told all my guys, if you have a question, ask. And that really, at least that helped me. I felt a little bit bad for Dave because he had to keep his mouth shut until that day he retired.
Dave, I'm sorry. That sounds
Yeah, that's tough.
awful.
That happened to Chuck Sikowski as well. He was a police officer.
Yep.
And his career ended. Katie, off to you.
So, Dave and Marianne, as experiencers, as somebody who might witness something, and I know the two of you have done, extensive training, and you've done, boot camps and training for field investigators and that. But as an experiencer, what advice do you have for people that are seeing something in the moment? What can be done that will help? Chain of custody and them being taken more seriously. What is your advice for experiencers?
Well, I think my advice is the same as it would be for somebody who just saw like an auto theft or something, is just be a good witness. Make sure that you're safe, though. You don't ever want to put yourself in a situation where it's dangerous or you could get hurt. But just try to take in as much information as you can, write down as quickly as you can notes about as detailed as you can be, and then just trust your instinct, trust your gut. If it feels weird, you know, the human psyche is an amazing thing. It's going to try and protect you. So listen to it, take down that information, get as detailed as you can, but do it in a safe way. Make sure that you're not putting yourself at risk.
We always say everybody has a cell phone, and if they can grab, if it's some kind of audio, if you can get an auto recording, great. Get some type of evidence. If you can take a picture, take a video. I know there's things that happen. Either it happens so fast you don't have time to get your camera out, or you don't even think about it. You're in such awe watching whatever it is. You don't want to move. You want to keep watching it. So basically, like Dave said, is just document as much as you can, good documentation, and then try to give us a call.
Good advice.
Yeah, it's hard in the moment, you know, when you see something, because you're not even thinking of your device. And even when you pull out your device, they're just like, nope, we don't take pictures, and they just blink out anyways. Was it George Knapp was talking about on that Netflix series when the guy tried to aim for the UFO with his gun. He had it in sight, and the UFO knew it was there, just phased out. Like, no, you're not going to shoot us. It's crazy. This phenomenon drives me nuts. But it's cool that you guys are doing this, because I think it's needed in law enforcement. Not only that, but you know, firefighters, whatnot. The people that are working all night long, you know, to service us in our every city. Actually, they have to have seen something, and it must happen multiple times a year. And you know, we often say this, but imagine all the stories that are out there that we're never going to hear of. You know, something amazing happened, got captured, and we're never going to know. And I'm really looking forward to the Steven Spielberg movie. I think that's going to bring a lot of people to this issue. Yeah, supposedly they just finished filming it, so now they're going to go into the editing, and I think that's going to bring maybe the UAP issue, you know, because Steven Spielberg, it has to the media, and maybe encourage police officers as well as military servicemen and people who work for the DoD. You guys are pretty much caught with your pants on when it comes down to UFOs and UAPs. You're not trained for that. I'm sorry, but you're trained to deal with humans, not something from somewhere else. That's too much to be asking of anyone. And I think that's the same for military personnel. I think that they're in something that they did not sign up for. They just got thrown into it. So I thank you guys so much for that. Where can people find you, and how do police officers get a hold of you?
Well, they can contact us on UAP-PD.com. You got to put that little dash in there, or you're not going to unfortunately find us, but UAP-PD.com. You can go down to the contact information, put your information in. I'll get an email, and I definitely will give you a call right back. We do have a Facebook page, UAPPD. Please come on there, share encounters, share stories that you might have. I tell law enforcement officers and first responders that if you want to be, you don't have to worry about your story getting out. We ask you, either you may remain absolutely anonymous, or you can identify yourself. It's up to what you want to do. Also, I have had cases where the witnesses don't want to talk over the phone, don't want to do a Zoom. They actually would rather talk to us in person, get to know us, know that, hey, yes, we are real cops out there. If anybody feels more comfortable talking in person than on the phone, I have no problem getting on a plane, getting in my Jeep, and heading out to wherever these folks are and talking to them in person. So please contact us.
You sound like Katie, because Katie does that all the time. She's always gone. Every week she texts me like, "Oh, we're over here and we're staying over there." I'm just like, how are you not like? She's just on the go all the time. I don't know anybody travels as much as this woman does. Guys, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. We really do appreciate it. These are subjects that we always want to touch up on, and of course, it's a new subject for police officers. And I know that's becoming a little bit more approachable, but you guys still have a long ways to go. I think law enforcement still has a long ways to go when it comes down to this. And I'm going to stick with my 35% of big cases involve police officers for now. I'm just going to stick with that.
Excellent.
Just you gotta have a number, right? Awesome, guys. Thank you so much, and we'll be back with another episode soon. I think Ron James is our next guest on the next episode, and of course, we do have Danny Sheehan coming up as well. So we got a bunch of cool interviews coming up. Katie, you do have a big event coming up in August. I believe it's the 22nd. Is that correct?
22nd through the 24th in the San Luis Valley. Speaking of the Valley of High Strangeness, and you can find more information about that at Snippy Event 2025. If you just put that in a search engine, it'll come up for more information on that event. But it's a really good place. It's dark sky territory. Mark D'Antoni will be out there, and the Navajo Rangers as well. And you'll get to hear more police stories. So I can't thank Marianne and Dave enough for the work you're doing. I think it is so important and is so needed in this community. And you have a super cool logo on top of that. And I think do you guys sell merch as well? Like those t-shirts and are awesome. So get one of those too. But thank you guys for
Oh,
being
you
here.
got to get
The work that
handcuffs
you're
for
doing.
aliens. Yeah.
Right.
Oh, there you go. Haven't thought
there
about
you
that
go.
yet.
Maybe air fresheners for next contact or something, right? Awesome, guys. Thank you so much.